The hard facts from the CNN News 18 Federal Bank Primetime Studio. Viewers, after the BJP found itself chastised by the voters in the recently concluded Lok Sabha election, there was only one question that was left to be asked. Will Prime Minister Modi hear the voters' message? The question has been significantly answered in the affirmative by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman while presenting her 7th consecutive budget, a new record surpassing the 6th consecutive budgets presented by Morarji Desai. Jobs or the lack thereof was singled out by many as one of the reasons why the BJP lost ground to the opposition on June 4. Today, the BJP-led NDA has taken a major step in focusing on the employment challenge by rolling out an employment-linked incentive or ELI scheme. Under this scheme, the government has allocated 2 lakh crore for the ELI scheme to create jobs over the next 5 years. The scheme includes a direct benefit transfer of 1 month's salary in 3 installments, up to Rs 15,000 to first-time employees registered in the Employees Provident Fund Organization or EPFO. Importantly, the scheme will incentivize additional employment in the manufacturing sector linked to the employment of the first-time employees. The incentive will be paid out up to Rs 3,000 per month for 2 years towards their EPFO contribution for each additional employee. Not just offering employment, but this will also give a reason to employers to formalize jobs, which is much needed. In addition to the ELI scheme, the government has announced an apprenticeship program along with an allowance to every apprentice. In other words, the government is virtually guaranteeing a first job. To ensure employability, that government has allocated Rs 1.48 lakh crore to create job opportunities. This will be spent to develop infrastructure. 3 crore houses for the urban poor, Amritsar-Gaya Industrial Corridor, several highways. Friends, let's very quickly listen into what the Prime Minister had to say today as he underlined the centrality of the budget exercise and its main thrust. In fact, viewers, the Prime Minister himself took ownership of the budget's central theme, which was employment. Listen in.
इस महत्वपूर्ण बजट के लिए मैं सभी देशवासियों को बधाई देता हूं। वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण जी और उनकी पूरी टीम बहुत बहुत बधाई की पात्र है। साथियों, ये बजट समाज के हर वर्ग को शक्ति देने वाला बजट है। ये देश के गांव गरीब किसान को समृद्धि की राह पर ले जाने वाला बजट है। पिछले 10 वर्षों में 25 करोड़ लोग गरीबी से बाहर निकले हैं। ये जो न्यू मिडिल क्लास बना है, यह बजट उनके सशक्तिकरण की निरंतरता का बजट है। इन नौजवानों को अनगिनत नए अवसर देने वाला बजट है। इस बजट से शिक्षा और स्किल को नई स्केल मिलेगी। ये मिडिल क्लास को नई ताकत देने वाला बजट है।
The finance minister laid out the context while holding a press conference. Interestingly, the backdrop to her media interaction was framed by a massive LED screen with the word employment emblazoned across it in giant type size. Listen in, viewers.
Prime Minister's package that I announced has 5 different schemes. The first timers is, I would think, one of the very, very innovative initiative. So what we are doing there is to be able to provide first timers one whole month's salary as subsidy. And this will be put into their account as direct benefit transfer, but possibly in tranches. When an employer picks up a first timer, and this is through the EPFO that you get to know that they have paid their provident fund amounts, and therefore the first timer indicator that we are talking about will be established. So they can't just say one of the existing employee is a first timer and claim it. There are enough checks and balances in the system to make sure that indeed the first timer is coming in. And then the first timers will be put through that learning curve, and this will help them to acquire skills so that they become fully productive.
The important point is that the funds for these employment generating schemes are being drawn from the surplus corpus provided by the RBI. In other words, they will not put pressure on the FM to miss targeted obligations towards ensuring fiscal prudency next year. Talking of which, the fiscal deficit stands at an appreciably conservative 4.9% for FY25. Many will, of course, be tempted to dismiss these initiatives as a shortcut. Listen in.
I'm afraid it's an underwhelming budget. The government has simply not addressed a number of key issues. Manrega wasn't even mentioned. Health and education, no indication of any increase in the share of GDP allocated to these vital subjects. Nothing in the announcements about how to actually do anything about the income inequality in this country.
अब मान लीजिए सरकार बचानी है तो अच्छी बात है कि बिहार को, आंध्र प्रदेश को कुछ विशेष पैकेज या विशेष योजनाओं से जोड़ा गया है, लेकिन उत्तर प्रदेश जैसा प्रदेश जो प्रधानमंत्री देता है, क्या वहाँ के किसान के लिए कुछ बड़े फैसले हैं? किसान की फसल की पैदावार, उसकी कीमत के लिए क्या कोई इंतजाम है?
Are they big enough? No, what do you mean by taking the name of Bihar and Andhra multiple times does not make it big. Now allocation for road construction, and you are presenting as if a great favor has been done to Bihar. Bihar needs a special status, special package, which is conspicuously absent.
Let's open this up. Let's ask some fundamental questions. We are joined by Amitabh Kant, who is G20 Sherpa, as always, KV Subramaniam, very articulate, former CA, and now, of course, with the IMF. Let's go straight across to KV Subramanian. Mr. Subramanian, your first opening remarks on this budget. Many people are suggesting that the budget has put the jobs challenge right there in the middle as a focus. But they're also saying that it's not deep enough, and you've heard some of the other commentary from the likes of the former finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram. How do you react to some of those people who are saying that, look, it's too late, too little, and of course not enough?
Very good morning, Rahul. I think some of these noises that are made on the political side, I would ignore because they're not worth responding to. Let me focus on the economics. I think the first budget of a new government is oftentimes looked at very carefully for what is the vision that they're laying out for the economy. And I did see a tangible vision for inclusive growth leading to, the India at 100, especially the emphasis on employment. I do not remember another budget that has actually focused as much on employment. I myself was part of 4 budgets, in the government. But this one is visionary, especially for its focus on employment, because Rahul, you know very well that inclusive growth, for that, jobs are incredibly important. I have mentioned this, before, but let me say it again. Some of the, good work that has been done on employment is not well recognized. Let me point out some facts. If you look at the high quality data, PLFS, and the and the data that is used by the claims database used by the RBI report, they show that over the last 10 years, 8.9 crore jobs have been created, and this is excluding jobs in agriculture. In other words, about 89 lakhs jobs on average have been created. That puts in context that the 80 lakh job number that the economic survey, pointed out is achievable, and this 89 lakh per year in the last 10 years was done without the kind of impetus that's been placed. I think on skilling, and many of us ourselves when we were younger have worked, as interns. I remember working with ICICI as an intern when I was doing my MBA. You end up picking a lot, learning by doing and applying some of the skills. I think that makes the people attractive for not only some of the top firms, but especially some of the smaller firms, because that experience really helps. And I think I like the fact that this is focused not on any firm, but on the top 500 firms where the experience will be significant. I'll also point out, this is a third aspect. If we look at these schemes, the incentives to employees and employers, there is evidence of this having already worked very well. The Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana that was announced during COVID, which had provided incentives to employers and employees for firms less than 1,000 employees, that has already, helped save or generate about 60 lakh jobs. So this is things that have worked very well. They've done that more. The increase in the threshold from Mudra, from 10 lakhs to 20 lakhs. And I think apart from that, the proposal to look at the tax code, I think that is extremely critical from an ease of doing business perspective, because the Income Tax Act that we have is 83 years old, and it's actually now a very large patchwork of lots of amendments. So overall, I think a very visionary budget that lays out the path for India to actually not only grow well, but grow in an inclusive manner by creating enough jobs.
When you say visionary, obviously the word visionary is derivative of something that is novel, but the opposition has come out and said this is a copy-paste job, especially on the ELI and some of the other incentives that have been offered to companies to boost jobs.
Rahul, if as they say, if there's something good that has happened, to actually copy paste that is, I think that I would commend that. As I was mentioning earlier, the Rozgar Yojana had done well. The ECGLS scheme, the credit guarantee to MSMEs, that had done well as well. To double down on what has already worked very well is something that should be commended rather than dismissed.
Okay, let me bring in the Niti Aayog former CEO as well as the G20 Sherpa, Mr. Kant. Mr. Kant, first impressions of the budget.
I think, Rahul, to my mind, it's a very path-breaking budget. It's a budget by a supremely confident government. It's a budget which is growth-oriented, which lays a lot of focus, huge focus on employment. And it's also a budget which lays emphasis on urbanization, on MSME, on startups by doing away with angel tax. And I think it's a very, very, to my mind, a budget which looks at a long-term perspective of making India grow at high rates of 8 to 9% per annum. It goes much beyond the economic survey. It's a budget which really envisages the growth story of India for the next 3 decades.
Okay, so in your,
to my mind, it's a remarkable budget.
So in your worldview, what is the thrust? What is the headline thrust of this budget, sir?
So I think the real crux of the budget is a growth story with employment. I mean, the fact that you are saying that you're going to, this is the first time it's happened in India's history that you're saying that you're going to give 1 month salary to all those who are getting employed and who are going to get a salary between 15,000 and 1 lakh, and you're going to reduce, give a benefit to all those who are going to get employed in the manufacturing sector. And thirdly, you're also going to give benefit to all the employers who employ people, give them a benefit of 3,000 rupees for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So these are remarkable things. And then this huge focus on a new centrally sponsored scheme for employing skilled workers and bringing in internship for the corporate sector, the 500 top corporate sectors to intern over 1 crore of people. I think these are remarkable initiatives to my mind.
Let's open this conversation up. KV Subramaniam, let me ask you, as I bring in the national spokesperson of the BJP, Mr. Malviya, I also want to bring in Karan Bhasin, Sanjay Jha, and Let's just get into some of the issues, because it's always important to have a balanced conversation. Some people will accuse me of starting with two individuals who are speaking for the government, so that may not be ideal. But KV Subramaniam, let me quickly bring you back in, as Amit Malviya is listening on to this and Sanjay Jha is waiting to pounce and attack and all of that, which is all very fair. It's good. It makes for a more cogent and obviously informed conversation. So let me also bring in KV Subramaniam. Mr. Subramaniam, very quickly, look, there is this criticism that a shortcut has been adopted, that all of this, requires actually more fundamental grounding. If you really want to boost employment, you've got to increase the pace at which you are setting up manufacturing companies, this, that, the other. Now, how do you address this?
So, Rahul, first of all, let me say that I'm not with the government anymore.
Yes.
And even when I was with the government, I would always speak based on data. So I think the accusation that we are, me or Mr. Amitabh Kant, are actually doing any bidding for the government, I think is not right. Unlike those who actually tend to focus only on the negatives, instead we are actually looking at what is credibly positive. I think the employment emphasis is really very good. Apart from that, the angel tax, I think that will really help in growing the entrepreneurial ecosystem, which, as we see, has grown significantly. And if you look at the data, from 2004 to 2014, number of new firms had grown at only 3.2%. In contrast, from 2014 to 2024, it has grown at almost 220%. That's orders of magnitude higher. And the angel tax actually will really further that as well. So overall, I think, it is a business of people who actually, have to criticize. They will do it. But from my perspective, as an economist looking at the vision that has been laid out, I don't agree with all this shortcut. I think people who are saying shortcut themselves are taking shortcuts in calling it a shortcut, because this is visionary, focusing on employment, focus on drivers that will lead to 8% growth, not just in the next few years, but over a decade. I think that can't certainly be a shortcut.
Okay, Mr. Malviya, one criticism that will come your way is, why did it take an election and perhaps, reversals in the election for this government to address this central sort of elephant in the room of employment, and then come back after a lot of prodding over the last 2.5, 3 years on this issue to address it in such a big way? Can you explain if there has been a time lag? If so, why?
Well, thank you, Rahul. I just heard the two gentlemen before me, and both of them seem to suggest that this is a fairly progressive and a forward-looking budget. Now, coming to your specific question on employment and the steps that have been taken, and you are questioning the timing of it and linking it to electoral reverses. Before I answer this question, let me tell you what Prime Minister Modi's government achieved on the employment front in the last 10 years. Just so that we are talking numbers, India created 12.5 crore jobs during financial year 14 and 23, compared to just about 2.9 crore jobs in 4 and 14. This is how you look at the performance of the UPA and the NDA. So it's not as if the focus on job creation is something which is new. It has always been there. Not just this, in the last 10 years that Prime Minister Modi was at the helm of affairs, we disbursed about 47 crore loans under the Mudra program, which was worth 29 lakh crore, and approximately 67% of that loan went to women. Now you can imagine that if so many entrepreneurs were being funded under the Mudra program, they were at least hiring 1 or 2 people along with them, and therefore the kind of employment numbers that we're talking about is massive. The problem in our discourse is that when we look at employment numbers, we look at government jobs. It's about time that we understand that this government clearly realizes that in a country as vast as India, getting everybody a government job is not possible, and it's not tenable either. And therefore, several opportunities have been created for people to become entrepreneurs, to employ and hire more number of people. So that should answer your question on what the government has done in the last 10 years and why the initiatives taken now have nothing to do with the election, but about the fact that if you have to create a big manufacturing base, if you have to get your industries incentivized to hire more people and also bridge the skill gap that exists. Today, if you speak to the industry veterans, they will tell you that they have huge number of openings at various levels, but they do not have enough skilled people, and perhaps they do not have the financial wherewithal to first take in these people, train them, and then deploy. What the government is doing through this entire employment program is that it is plugging in that gap that exists where companies need skilled people but do not have adequate resources or the inclination to train them and take them through an internship process and then absorb them because it comes at a cost. The government is saying we will bear the cost. Let's ensure that we plug this gap between the requirement and the skills of the people.
Right.
And that is why this focus. And let's not forget, this is the first year of Modi 3.0. This is the first budget. Naturally, it is a clear signal that the government is looking at consolidating India's economic growth, particularly in the post-COVID era, and club it with this entire skill and apprentice program so that we get a very robust industry and plug the PLI scheme into it. You have a story where you are looking at growing your manufacturing, you're getting in more skilled people, the government is funding that gap, industry gets resources, and of course we are doing everything else from power, from land, from other resources required to set up industry. So it's an overall picture.
So very quickly, KV Subramaniam, yes. Okay, let me open this up.
The roadmap.
Okay, let me bring in KV Subramaniam. KV Subramaniam, okay, and Sanjay Jha is listening in, and so is Dipanshu Mohan and Karan Bhasin. Very quickly, I want to ask you, KV Subramaniam. Look, yes, there has been an incentivization of job creation. Hopefully, the companies will respond. But obviously, the longer-term aim is to also generate or boost manufacturing. So far, we've seen private investment has lagged government spend. Is this budget creating the environment for that?
So Rahul, even on investment, I think we have the story is more nuanced than just investment not happening. Let me give you some data, and this is from the economic survey for the year 2023. NSO data shows that the in private capex expanded by 19.8%. For 2024, and again, the economic survey now uses Axis Bank research data across 3,000 firms, both in the formal and informal sector, showing that investment has increased at about 19.8% as well. And finally, if you look at the gross fixed capital formation in 2019, it was about by the private sector was 5 lakh crore. That has increased to about 9 lakh crore. That said, I think given the excellent situation, especially the dual balance sheet problem being taken care of, the private sector is in a good shape to invest even more. And with the PLI
but hold on,
and
KV Subramaniam, then how does that explain manufacturing down to 13% of GDP?
On that, I think manufacturing sector growth in 2024, Rahul, has been 9.9%. This is economic survey data. 2023 was not that good, but 24, 9.9% growth in real terms, in manufacturing. So again, I think when you look at the facts, there has been investment that has happened, but I think more investment needs to come in. As I've always emphasized, the virtuous cycle.
Okay, so what explains lagging consumption? If not the fact that salaries, obviously people have no disposable income, or then the fact that agriculture, which is unfortunately not contributing that much to the GDP, has 40% of all the jobs.
So, and this is something I've highlighted, umpteen times, Rahul. When you look at the virtuous cycle, consumption follows investment, and therefore consumption, and the impetus that has been provided to employment will definitely, mark my words, this year consumption will grow at more than the 4% at which it has grown, because investment is coming in. And both, government capex and private capex. I think private capex needs to ramp up more. I'm not denying
Yeah, I mean, that
but
was
it
the
has
whole
happened
criticism.
actually well.
In fact, even Nirmala Sitharaman sort of urged private capital to come to the party in the last budget. So let's at least, in the interim budget. So let's not paper over that. That's the reason why I was asking.
No, Rahul, I'm not papering over actually,
Okay.
but the facts are facts. These
Okay.
are data from the economic survey, which we cannot dismiss. All the three facts that I mentioned. That said, there is, overall gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP needs to touch about 40%. That is what is the target. And given that target, and what the finance minister and the team is trying to do is to incentivize that, that higher growth rates of capex and private capex happens for us to reach that target. That's the way I would actually look at this.
Okay. So viewers, fundamentally, will this budget actually address that issue is what we are coming to. We can quibble over the exact numbers, the magnitude of the problem, but there is a challenge and that needs to be overcome. Thank you, K.V. Subramaniam, for spending some time with us. I want to open this up, bring in Sanjay Jha, bring in Dipanshu Mohan, also bring in, obviously, Amit Malviya to play counterfoil to what we're going to hear next. So, Sanjay Jha, look, is the Congress now being unreasonable? If the only criticism from the Congress is that, oh, you've copy-pasted our manifesto, what's wrong with that? I mean, the opposition, if it has good suggestions, it can strike 2 or 3 other people. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, surely there are more than one mind that thinks alike.
Yep. Rahul, imitation, as they say, is the best form of flattery. So I think that's part for the course. But I do admire that you have asked some very pertinent questions at the very outset. Since we are talking of jobs and there is an acknowledgement, I think I want to actually appreciate what Mr. Kant mentioned, that jobs is one of the primary considerations for this government. It is also an acknowledgement that there has been jobless growth. Now, here is the problem. These are all very ad hoc, fixed solutions because you need, for the gigantic scale of India's workforce, the big demographic dividend story, you can't sustain it on government expenditure alone. Now, if you look at in fact, for a considerable period, there has been no private investment. If you look at the data, the private investment as a proportion of the GDP would be lower than 30%. Once upon a time, it was as high as 35%. So it's significantly lower. Point number one. Point number two, that ease of doing business is really been low. Forget the hype over some gaming of the ranking system, etc. The reason why private investment is not happening, Rahul, is because the ease of doing business is not at all impressive. And I would like to bring the elephant in the room. You can't have a culture of vindictive politics, the CBI, ED income tax story. Trust me, I live in Mumbai. You have lived here as well. Many people from business and industry are extremely frightened of the culture of political vendetta that prevails under this government. Point number two, there is a lot of unutilized capacity. I mean, even if that capacity may have gone up a bit, you're still talking about at least 20% of unutilized capacity. Who's really going to invest? Evidence of that, when Nirmala Sitharaman gave those subsidies on tax, 1,45,000 a year in 2019, it aggregates to roughly 8,70,000 crores of foregone income of revenues. Where has the private investment come? Where are the jobs? They have both been absent. Okay. Which brings me to one other point. Even the foreign investors, they have given some tax benefit to foreign multinational companies. Rahul, pay attention to that, hype over FDI. They kept talking about some absolute numbers. But in economics, everything is based on a percentage. There are absolutes, but you look at the percentages. In terms of the percentage of FDI as a proportion of GDP, it is today lower than what it was 16 years ago. It is the lowest.
I'm seeing a challenge coming to you from The Economist.
My one last point. Between 2021 to 23, projects worth 23 lakh crores have been scrapped. That tells you that you have a long way to go and the government copying some stuff from the Congress manifesto, yes, it definitely will help in the short term, but you need structural fundamental change
required. Karan Bhasin and Amit Malviya respond, and after that Dipanshu Mohan and his take. Yes, Karan Bhasin, quick one. You're holding up some graph.
Yeah. So this is basically India's real investment ratio, and you can see it's at an all-time high of 35%. I've seen this issue being talked a lot, particularly by people who should know better, that investment ratio is low. Largely, most of my peers say that India's real investment rate is low, less than 30%. What they ignore is that they're looking at the nominal numbers, and no macroeconomist worth his salt would like to look at nominal numbers. If you do it correctly, you would see that India's real investment rate has now, gradually leveled up to where it was previously. So it's actually at 35%, not at 30%, as Mr. Jha was speaking. And I have another chart I want to show him on total employment in India, which again is at an all-time high. The issue really is not of jobs not being created. The issue really is the kind of jobs that people want are not being created. So let's not, use terms like jobless growth that will deflect the issue. The issue over here is that people want formal, well-paying jobs that, cater to their skills and matches their skills and expectations. And unfortunately, that has been a challenge which has persisted through much of this century. So it's not something that has happened only in the last 10 years. If anything, between 2004 and 14, the situation was much worse than what it is now. And one final point on the workforce being primarily in agriculture, a very interesting trend has happened over the last couple of years, which is that even within agriculture, we see an increasing proportion of the workers move towards cash crops. And that's particularly interesting because that means that even within the agriculture, when we look at the primary sector as a prime employer in the economy, there's a churn happening. People are moving towards growing, avocados, for instance, rather than, rice, paddy and pulses. So that's also something that we should keep in mind, that we are in an economy that is bound to go through several structural changes as we grow and move from a $2,500 per capita income to a $5,000 per capita income. And that's exactly what's happening.
Okay, could it
and
have
this
happened?
Budget will, of course, help you get there.
Okay, we'll get into that conversation, the latter part. But Amit Malviya, quick response on a political level to Sanjay Jha.
It's a luxury to be a critic, and if you happen to be in opposition, you don't really have to worry about whatever you say. But just to put the record straight, the gross fixed capital formation in this country continues to grow. The gross capital formation by private non-financial corporations has increased by 19.8% in FY23. And as per an Axis Bank research report, the private investment across the set continues to grow at about 19.8% for FY24. Not just this, the household are leading the capital formation, and incidentally in 2023, the sale of residential real estate was the highest in India in the last decade. So if everything was as gloomy as Sanjay Jha would like us to believe, how is this happening? And last but not the least, in the last 13 years, it was the first time that the S&P rating agency upgraded India's rating from stable to positive. Now, if it was all that bad, as Sanjay and his cohort would like us to believe, then perhaps the rest of the world is not seeing what they are seeing. So let's not get carried away. The fact is that I have given you the employment numbers in the last decade. We've created 12.5 crore jobs. We've sort of put out a huge amount of entrepreneurial trust with about 47 crore loans made under Mudra totaling up to 29 lakh crore. So clearly all of that has gone towards employment. And let me ask you a very fundamental question. If you are getting so many airports made, if you're getting roads done, new malls are coming up, new infrastructure is being developed, then who is building all of this stuff? Naturally, there is employment that is being generated. And you look at quality data from PLFS or the RBI data, they clearly seem to suggest that the number of jobs being created is an all-time high. Not just that, if you look at the poverty numbers, right, which is fundamentally important for a country like India, you will find that we have pulled out 25 crore people from poverty.
Okay.
The extreme poverty levels have completely diminished in India. And this is despite COVID, the kind of welfare programs that we've run. So there is a huge amount of positive for the country. If anybody is really interested, should read the economic survey that was put out yesterday. I can't expect the Congress or the opposition to read it, but that is the reality.
So let me bring in Dipanshu Mohan very quickly. This gloom is a factor of a motivated narrative. That's really what the BJP national spokesperson is saying. Dipanshu Mohan.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rahul. And I appreciate that a couple of questions that you'd asked were consistent with also the critical facts on the state of the economy, that the economic survey and most importantly, the finance minister implicitly, I think, is addressed with this budget, which is the key question around employment generation. Apart from that, the two other main issues that the government has faced, which were evident in the political economy of the recent elections, was higher food inflation, the increasing amount of debt, which as a result of the household level, from government level, always affects, people at some way or the other. Fiscal consolidation has been the strong suit of the government. It has come at the cost of revenue expenditure a lot of times. But what I seriously see when I look at this budget are three big points. And I think that's very important. First, there's a tacit acknowledgement by the government that there are serious issues at a structural level with the nature of policies which have not created the kind of jobs it wanted to. I'm not questioning the intent of the government. It has done everything it could on capex. It is very high. But what you would see is that in this budget, the government has not increased overall expenditure. Directionally, it has moved around increasing more schemes on revenue expenditure, which would be targeted at employment. And that should be welcome. The second is that because of the newer sort of focus on coalition politics, the transfers to states have increased. I would like to see this happening more in the context of the next 2 to 3 years, because fiscal devolution and the timely disbursement of funds has not been the strong suit of the government in the last 5 years, at least in the last 5 years, and that creates problems in completion of projects. Third, and that's a key point, is most of the key schemes that the government has had, the government's own schemes in the last 6 to 7 years that it has announced, they've not increased or seen an increase in spending. What you see is that with housing, there is an increase in some amount of spending. A lot of tinkering has been done around taxes, which I would imagine has been done to increase the disposable income of the higher middle income class. And I think that's, again, should be welcomed. What you want to look at with this budget is continuity from a humbling economic survey report, which tries to give a very good status quo picture of the state of the economy. On investment, you need to have a separate debate, because what you'll find is private investment for increased profitability does not mean that there's added productivity. And that's a key question the economists, not accountants, look at. Because you have to put the investment in context to what jobs principally are being created. And that's really not happened where there is investment. And mostly in the MSME sector, which I would appreciate for this particular intervention of the government, there has been some effort made to release stress, which has been affecting 80% of the job creating manufacturing space. So on those points where there is credit, there is due, but you'll expect this to be a medium-term fiscal strategy for the government if it's serious about addressing the structural issues that it wants to. There is tacit acknowledgement of that.
Well, viewers, remember that in about 5 months, there's another budget that's going to be presented. So this is like the interim, in the interim budget, after another interim budget. So look, let's not sweat it that much. What is great, however, is the fiscal consolidation is ongoing, which means that fundamentally the Indian economy is better placed, perhaps even much more secure and stable than some of the leading economies of the world. And whether we suggest that it has been nudged by the electoral outcome, or it is a quick redressal of grievances that it believes have to be addressed in the normal course, the fact is that a more receptive to voter grievances and a bit more, therefore, accountable government is good for everyone. It's a win-win, in fact, for the voter and, of course, for democracy. So there can be no quibble of that, viewers. Let's go straight across. I'm being told that Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri also now joins us. Let's go straight across to engage him in a few questions. Mr. Puri, thank you very much for speaking to me. You, of course, hold an important economic portfolio in your own right, but a quick conversation with you on the budget, the 7th by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, a record in itself, actually, emphasizing continuity. But how is this budget different from those presented by 10 NDA governments before this one?
Well, I think the difference, both in terms of the continuity and change, will come if you do the context setting for this budget. I mean, after holding office for 10 years, the Prime Minister's Finance Minister presented an interim budget in the beginning of February this year, and this budget presented today should be seen in that context as a continuum of that interim budget. It is very significant in the sense that the emphasis here, contrary to expectation, I mean, I saw a lot of comment, and I see still the comment, people say, well, you know, this is a time to reach out and please section X, Y, and Z. Now, if you have that kind of a mindset where you want to use freebies and populism as a instrument for governance, then you are in a different. But the Modi government has been anything but that. After the 10 years when it has been able to navigate the economy from the fragile 5 to from the 10th to the 5th position, and the IMF says now maybe 2027 will be the 3rd largest economy in the world, and then moving onwards to 2047. So this can only be done provided you are responsible, and that fiscal consolidation which you undertake unleashes the productive forces. So which I look at today, I was very happy to see 3 lakh crore for women-led development. Rahulji, you know, we've come from women-centered development to women-led development through the Women's Reservation Bill. 2,66,000 crore on rural development. Then for youth, 4.1 crore jobs over a 5-year period. 1 crore youngsters getting internships in 500 of the top companies. Mudra loan being doubled from 10 lakhs max to 20 lakhs. When you see all these things happening, also digital inclusion, what's happening on the ENP side, I can give you Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana from the 4 crores that we built, another 3 crore, including 1 crore for the urban sector. If you look at the totality, there is something in this for everyone, particularly our younger people, the youth, the kisan, the poor, and our other women. So this is a fiscal consolidation, responsible budget, which has already, I think, set the task to move from here to the Viksit Bharat. This is the first stage after 10 years of Modi government to lift it forward. You've grown at 8%. Coming time, you'll grow at 7.5% or so. And you have to navigate a particularly difficult global situation. I'm not only talking about geopolitical tensions, Rahulji, I'm also talking about, you know, the fact that parts of the global economy, many parts of Europe, are either flirting with recession or are in recession. You've got political uncertainties in terms of some of these governments, whether they will come back or not in Europe. That's a different discussion. But India must hold firm and be solid on its own economic development strategy, and that's what this budget prepares us for.
Okay, so let me ask you, because the big concern, and you know, some people have viewed the election results through the filter of the lack of jobs in the economy and a certain degree of distress. Now, how does this budget address this challenge? Because even if you looked at the context, so to speak, the context tells us that employment is an issue in the backdrop. Even when Nirmala Sitharaman ji today was addressing the press conference, Mr. Puri, the word employment was written right behind her. So how does this budget do that?
I think, Rahul, you've that it's vintage, Rahul. First of all, the election result I have a slightly different take on it. I saw a picture of the G7 leadership gathered, and I looked at each one of them and I thought to myself, which one of them, whether it's Joe Biden or Macron or Sunak, can come back. And there was Narendra Bhai Damodar Das Modi ji, the Prime Minister of India, and I said, this guy is coming back for sure. All right, what about the others? I mean, after a devastating 2 years of COVID, a once-in-a-century pandemic, for any party to come back for a third term with a pre-poll alliance of 292, it means we must have done something right. Now, if we didn't get the 400 or the self-created hype that we inflicted on ourselves, well, I don't know. I don't want to go into that politics. But today the fact is you're back for a third term with safe numbers. Throughout the world, Rahul, there has been a certain concern that even where economic growth takes place, and it's not taking place equally everywhere, there also the economic growth takes place because there is a growth in the services sector, in technology, so that joblessness is a characteristic. Because, if you go into high technology or even normal technology, you're not creating brick and mortar jobs. Whereas India, at the level of development it finds itself in, it has to also deal with those issues. So maybe, as I said, I am very proud of the figures that the RBI has put out, the others have put out, on how many people have come into the EPF reckoning, how many jobs we've created. But yes, if there is a lag, let us utilize these 5 years, and this budget frontally addresses that, Rahul. The fact that you're going to be dealing with 4.1 crore jobs you have to create in 5 years, the fact that you're sending 1 crore of our youngsters for internships to the top 500 companies, yes, that focus is well deserved. And if more needs to be done, I'm sure that those who are responsible for the navigation of the economy will address that as well.
So let's look at this first-time assistance of 6,000 rupees and some of the other so-called DBT payouts to the first-timers. Now, some people, and I've been reading a little bit of commentary on this, say this is a shortcut, a DBT fashioned on a Congress blueprint that was mentioned in their sort of Nyaya Patra or whatever, will not solve the problem at a fundamental level. How do you respond to all your political detractors today?